One of the least known laws of Shmitah is actually one of the first to begin applying. There's a mitzvah that used to be min haTorah, today is only midrabanan, of Tosefes Shviis, of adding on to the Shmitah year. That means that there's a mitzvah to begin the various prohibitions that begin during Shmitah, during the Shmitah year, to actually begin during a period preceding the Shmitah year, which would be in the 6th year of the cycle, which is the year that we are in right now. So this halacha today, again, is midrabanan. However, it's a halacha that we follow, and it's called Tosefes Shviis. It's adding on to the prohibition of Shviis. So practically, how this manifests itself is as follows. First halacha to begin is the halacha of planting fruit trees. A tree that is planted for its fruit, an edible tree, an ilan ma'achal is what it's called, a fruit tree. So that is prohibited beginning 40 days prior to the beginning of the year. So that comes out on the calendar as Yud Zayin Av, the 17th of Av. So that means already from this year, from the 17th of Av, we already have a prohibition that we are not allowed to plant any trees. So if you have any plans of planting a tree, a fruit tree, so then you have to do that before the 17th of Av. Okay, when it comes to the replanting of a tree, like let's say you're talking about uprooting a tree from one place and moving it from there to another place, so there the halachos are complex and you should ask a shaila. It makes a difference if it was in a pot to begin with or not. It also makes a difference of what type of pot it was in, as well as where that pot was located. So if you have a shaila of physically uprooting a fruit tree and bringing it from one location to another, you should make sure to ask a competent posek. When it comes to a tree, let's say like a pine tree or the type of a tree that does not produce any edible fruit, there's a machlokas, and one should ask a shaila if the case comes up. Okay, but what about planting other plants? What about planting flowers? What about planting seeds to grow various different types of plants? So here the halacha is as follows. If it's in a normal place where people plant, a regular place, meaning it is subject to the prohibition of sfichin. The prohibition of sfichin will be discussed elsewhere, but that basically is if the plant is growing in a place where it's normal for the following plants to grow. So this would certainly apply to in your yard or in your home in a planter. The halacha is as follows. When it comes to tvua and kitnias, this is like grains and beans. The halacha is that they have to be planted with enough time to reach a third of their growth before Shmitah begins. So a person has to know how their plants grow, how long it takes, and you have to plant it with enough time to grow for at least a third of its growth prior to Shmitah, prior to Rosh Hashana. When it comes to orez, dochen, pereg, vesumsum, this is rice and other types of pereg is poppy seeds. Sumsum is sesame. These types of things have to be completely finished. They have to be Yigomer Pirium before Rosh Hashanah. They have to be completely, fully grown by the time Rosh Hashanah begins. When it comes to vegetables, let's say carrots and tomatoes, cucumbers, those have to be novat before Rosh Hashanah. They have to flower before Rosh Hashanah begins. Finally, because there are many things that are prohibited to do during the Shmitah year, or things that are only permitted to do under necessity, things like watering, things like removing weeds under certain circumstances is permissible if they're going to kill the plants otherwise, as we'll talk about during the Shmitah shiurim. However, any of that could be done now, that could be done before Shmitah, all of that has to be done. All of that's allowed to be done up until Rosh Hashanah. Any type of work in the yard, any type of removing of weeds and all those things, that is permissible to do. And a person should make sure that they get their yard in shape as best as they can prior to Shmitah, because once Shmitah begins, they're not going to be able to do a lot of that work any longer, and some of it will only be permissible b'shas hadchak, in a case of great need. Okay, so that's a basic summary of the halachos of Tosefes Shviis. Trees may not be planted from Yud Zayin Av. Grains and beans have to be planted in such a way that they will reach a third of their growth before Shmitah begins. Rice and sesame and other grains like that, seeds like that, they have to complete their growth completely. They have to be ready to be picked by the time Shmitah comes in. And when it comes to regular vegetables, they have to flower. The flowers have to open up before Shmitah begins. And finally, we have to try to do as much work on our yards before the year begins so that we avoid having to come to do it during Shmitah year itself. These shiurim are mostly sourced in the Sfarim of Rav Tzvi Cohen Shlita.